Welcome to Choreography, a podcast about the greatest sport on ice, figure skating. I'm Wendy Buskey.
And I'm Adrian Buskey, and this time we are going to be doing kind of a threefer episode. This will be our U.S. Nationals 2025 preview, but before we get to that, we're going to briefly recap Canadian Nationals 2025, which just happened this past weekend, and also the FISU World University Games, which happened in Italy and was actually really rad. Had a lot of great performances at that one and was very worth watching. And if you did not happen to see it, going to FISU.tv and seeing a lot of the replays of that is worth watching because there's a lot of great performances, several of which that are really high caliber for happening at an event like this.
Oh, yeah. We'll talk about that a little bit more when we get to it. But there's, in particular, off the top of my head, two performances that are like don't miss type programs where I highly recommend going and finding them online.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to start first with Canadian Nationals. We're going to try to breeze through these pretty quickly for both of those before we get to U.S. Nationals because there's just a lot to cover
So
in this.
much.
But I think Canadian Nationals, for one thing, was a lot more exciting than it was last year because they got to have an actual audience.
Yes. Last year in Calgary, or I think it was Calgary that had Nationals in Canada last year. I know it was in Alberta. It was absolutely stupid cold to levels that most of us in the U.S. don't even ever experience unless you're in Alaska. So not too many people showed up and it hurt the overall competition vibe. And a lot of competitors talked about how tough it was on them to just have no audience. It was probably a bit of a flashback to the COVID times.
Yeah.
This time, really nice crowd turnout, very enthusiastic and supportive crowd too. So it seemed like a really worthwhile event to be at. And all of the participants seemed really, really enthusiastic as well.
Yeah. So I think the first one to talk about is men's because we knew going into this that it was going to be a diminished field because you had withdrawals from a lot of the people you would have thought would be competitive at this because reigning champion Wesley Chu wasn't there. Steven Gogolev, who has been kind of a ghost through a lot of the last couple of seasons because of injuries and stuff, but he wasn't going to be there. And then I think last minute...
Yeah, Alexa Ratzik had to pull out after the short program.
Yeah, and I think that he was on a lot of people's radar to be on the podium as well. So things really kind of took a weird turn going into this. But what we were hoping for and expected was that Roman Sadowski got back on the top of the podium and became Canadian national champion for the second time. It took 5 years in between those wins, and certainly it has been a very up and down career for Roman Sadowski. But he looked really good here. He looked way more focused than we've seen in a while. His jumps were more dependable. Roman has always had terrific artistry. Here, the focus maybe seemed like too lasered in, I think, just because he was determined to not fall apart.
He was careful, is how I felt, which I appreciate after so many problems last season. And honestly, he can't not know that everyone feels that way in the skating world, that like, here's this guy with mountains of potential and is just so, I hate to say unreliable because that sounds so harsh, but he's just not competitive a lot of the time because he's just so inconsistent. So seeing him here being focused and careful, maybe not as free, and I know he tends to have a bit of avant-garde, showmanship in his own way. He's very unique, but I'd rather him be careful and get that national title back so that he can take another step towards what will hopefully get him maybe even to the Olympics again next year. This is one step further.
No surprise was that the junior Anthony Paradis made it onto the podium here in silver. If there's a real highlight from the men's competition, just kind of like last time, it really is Paradis. He does not have the technical to really rank very high scores, particularly because he just does not have a triple axel. But artistry wise, there's kind of nobody as good in the game there. And everybody has an eye on him internationally because if he can get his technical up to snuff to compete in real senior elite competition, he could be very dangerous.
So dangerous. The fact that he got a 225 here, and I mean, yeah, it's nationals. We're going to see a little bit of padding, but at the same time, my God, Anthony is just his own character. I've never seen anyone quite like him. And while he's not going to be everybody's flavor, I absolutely adore him. And I think he has so much that he could bring to this sport. So yeah, get that triple axel, Anthony, please. Because once he has that and can get those jumps bigger and more consistent, He has everything else. He is such a star. I love this kid, and I can't wait to see more of him.
And he doesn't have quads yet either. So,
Yeah.
He's playing much more in the sort of Jason Brown zone of a person who has to get by on extreme artistry rather than having the really big jump arsenal, but still great to watch. Just so much fun every time.
Oh my gosh, so much.
I think it was a surprise to see the junior skater David Lee make his way into the bronze position here. We did watch him. It was, nice skates, not super exciting, very junior quality, not super memorable, but he's on the podium at his national championships. That is a huge honor. I think it is worth kind of noting that Roman at the top of this is at a 240.35. These are very suboptimal numbers when it comes to international competition, at least when you get into the big leagues. When you look at Roman and also Alexa and Wesley were named to go to 4 continents coming up, they're going to be up against stiff competition, and a 240 is not going to be really strong probably there. And Canada has hedged their bets a little bit and has not named who they're going to send to Worlds yet. So I think they're waiting to see what happens at 4 continents. Even though Roman is their national champion, he is also not consistent, and those numbers are not big. So I think they're waiting for 4 continents to decide that.
100%. It's a competition within a competition. Countries do this all the time. They send a team to 4 continents and just let it play out on ice. So I really think it's between Wesley and Roman, and may the best man win while they're there. But let's move on to the women's event, which I actually thought was better than I expected, with a really strong showing from Maddie Schizas.
Maddie looked awesome. We have talked a lot about how Maddie is also one of those people who has everything it takes to be a star, but doesn't always put it together. And I think the last couple of years, my big complaint with Maddie Schizas has been a dearth of quality material. I think she gets let down a lot by the programs that she has been given or chosen, or however she ends up with them. And this season, we were seeing that her short program to the Lion King was really working on her. And we were seeing that brightness and ability, but the free skate wasn't working. And so she did the wild swing of introducing a brand new program, Butterfly Lovers, introducing that new free skate at nationals, and boy, did it pay off.
It worked. It was fantastic. You would not have known watching it that it was brand new. She looked totally at ease and comfortable. Her jumps looked more confident than I may have ever seen. She just had that spark that I haven't seen in her maybe since the last Olympics in the team competition. She's bringing a lot more emotion to it. Like we've said before, a pissed off Maddie is kind of our favorite Maddie.
Yeah.
But this was a softer Maddie that had more emotion, but it still had that fire. And I think that's the magic combination for her. She needs the artist and the fire to kind of merge together, and all of the jumps to actually work. And it all came together and earned her 3rd national title here. So that's great.
Yeah, it was a real return to form. I think the 203.87 that she earned there is maybe a little generous based on some of the problems that she did have in that free skate.
She seems surprised, but I'm also thrilled for her to get a score that's that high. So that's awesome.
I mean, you got to love, Maddie has no poker face. And so I think she was even looking around her coaches going, is that number real? That can't be real. And we'll come back to that because definitely scores here have some question marks around them, but
in different events.
Yeah. However, if there was a placement I was so excited about here, it is a silver medal win and first national podium placement for Sarah Maud Dupuis.
It was so good to see. She was excellent, super strong, especially in her short. I really liked her free skate was lovely as well, but I just prefer her short program. I think it just suits her so well. Awesome to see that she'll actually get the opportunity to go to 4 continents. I know she's hoping to make the World Team Trophy team again as well. So hopefully she gets that. Again, she's one of those under the radar skaters who has been building and building and building, has lots of potential, just has to kind of come into her own. And maybe this is that step towards it. So yeah, she had a 182.61. That's not enormous, but it's not terrible. That's really strong overall. And especially at Canadian Nationals, just well done.
A skater who I was not familiar with, but some of you in the comments had actually told us to kind of look out for, is Catherine Medlin Spence, who is somebody who I think only had 1 international appearance this year, but she won Warsaw Cup, which was something I wasn't really aware of. I somehow just sort of missed that entire competition. She is a little bit older. I think she's 24. And I think when we were watching it, you said that she reminded you a little bit of like Sarah Everhart as somebody who obviously has the ups, that has the jumps, but doesn't necessarily have the full creative package, but still was fun to watch and just barely got edged out by Sarah Maud Dupuis.
Yeah, she just barely came behind Sarah Maud Dupuis and just barely came in ahead of last year's national champion, Kaya Reuter. Kaya, I will want to spend a minute on, though, because I feel like she's in a transitional year. She just switched camps for coaching to Tracy Wilson and Brian Orser. So her coming in with a 179.41 in fourth place is nothing to scoff at. And I mean, she came in slightly ahead of Catherine Medlin Spence in the long program. It's just that short program that keeps betraying her. And I am assuming that Tracy Wilson's going to spend a lot of time with her on that short program over the summer going into the Olympic year.
That is such a specific problem that they need to solve for Kaya, because she's a very enjoyable skater, but the short program is always this huge hole in her repertoire. So hopefully they can get that sorted out. But speaking of things that are in the process of being sorted out, I think when we go to pairs, we do see the return here of Deanna Stellato-Dudek and Maxime Deschamps. They do win with a 2:07.06. But they definitely didn't do it in the shape that they wanted to. They clearly, in their free skate, had a number of little issues, and I think it left it as a little bit more of a nail biter as far as like who was going to come out on top here. But I think it's worth contextualizing it with the illness that took them down. Apparently went on a lot longer than I was aware of. And I read that Max had lost something like 10 pounds.
Which he didn't have to lose.
Right.
He's a lean human, and to lose 10 pounds in a very short period of time, like you could tell looking at him on the ice here at Canadian Nationals, there was a huge difference in his face. Like he just looked gaunt.
Yeah.
So at first I just was like, wow, Max has lost some weight. And then he brought that up that it was due to the illness. I'm like, oh my God, that has to take so much out of an athlete. And I think they only had like 2 weeks of prep time to get ready for this competition between him getting better and then having the ability to fully train. It's not that surprising, even though it seems surprising to them because they've been having great practices. Anyway, I do feel like there is certainly something to be said there that we didn't see them at full power.
Yeah. And so they've got a little time to get ready for Four Continents and for Worlds. They do come away with the gold here, and they still had a lot about their performance that looked strong. It just
their short was great.
It's just very clear that they were not in the condition that they wanted to be yet. And while it was obviously frustrating for them, you weren't seeing quite the Deanna anger stare so much at the end of it, which is good.
It didn't look like rage. It looked more like disappointment.
Yeah.
Whenever you know you've been landing all of your throws at home and then you come to the competition and you're missing a little bit on everything that you do, it's got to feel so infuriating. Yeah. So in that regard, I sympathize because she's just the most perfectionist of the skaters. And it shows because look at their triple twists, look at their lifts, their spins, like everything is so precise and beautiful. So whenever those jumps and throws aren't working, I'm not surprised she's just getting furious.
Yeah, and nobody wants to win their championship sloppy, right?
No,
you always want to win
not.
in commanding fashion, and that's not what happened here. And they definitely got some pressure put on them by the second place team of Leah Pereira and Trent Michaud. I think they had a really strong outing and looked maybe as good or better than I've seen them all season.
I think this might be the best I've ever seen them. They really came together. That short program that is choreographed by Olivia Smart and Jean-Luc Baker, it just looks great on them. They look so at home in it. And I was just noticing that I feel like Trent was at his best.
Yes.
Like he just looked phenomenal. Leah looked great as well, but Trent was just shining there this weekend. So, I mean, they won the free skate. That's incredible for them. And that's with a mistake on their end, too. Like I think she fell on one of the throws. It feels like they're coming into their own at the exact right time. Like they can send 3 teams because Deanna and Max are the world champions. They have 3 teams going to Worlds. That puts them in great position to earn 3 spots to the Olympics. And Leah and Trent are right there, ready to hit the ground running for next season. I think that they're looking strong.
And in a little bit more distant third, but with a couple of really impressive performances that bode well for this team, Kelly Ann Lorin and Lucas Thierry. We've been talking this whole season about how they are definitely the up-and-comer team that has a lot of work to do to kind of get up to that highly competitive level. but we've been seeing very consistent improvement from them, particularly from Kellyanne. Every outing, they seem to get a little bit better. Their speed was so much better here. And in general, these were more enjoyable programs. They seemed more assured of them. They seemed more synced up. If there's an issue, it's the death spirals, which they look very effortful rather than effortless. And that's a place that needs work. But I did really like these.
No, I did too. I thought they did a great job. But overall, I think that those three teams were just leagues above everybody else. We watched a few of the other teams that had fallen maybe into fourth and fifth, and they were good. It's just, I feel like you're seeing that kind of separation of who are the favorites going into that next season. And I know I'm already getting ahead of myself talking about the Olympic year, and it's not even the World Championships yet. But I really do feel like you're seeing that lift. And this team has definitely had that moment this season.
Yeah, and all three of those teams have been named for four continents and for Worlds. So they know that they all have a lot of training ahead of them to get ready for some pretty high-powered competitions. And that will be the same story for the podium for dance,
which went exactly to plan, except maybe the bronze.
Yeah, well, I think that we called that. I think it happened the way we thought it was going to. I think what also happened here, the way we thought it was going to, was a somewhat questionable level of scoring. So now, Piper Gillis and Paul Poirier here in gold were fabulous.
Oh, absolutely.
They were absolutely terrific. Very, very on. They did not have those problems that we saw at other times during the Grand Prix where they had falls. These are extremely intricate programs with a lot going on with them. However, the scores they got were astronomical.
Yeah.
And there's a weird moment in the broadcast for their free dance afterwards where they get off the ice, they go to the kiss and cry, the replay starts going, the commentators start talking about it, and about halfway through the normal amount of time, maybe not even halfway through the replay just cuts off, it jumps to them in the kiss and cry, and they get their scores. And the commentator even says, wait, we already have scores? It's like the judges just didn't even take the normal amount of time, just the average amount of time, not a lengthy amount, to just review all of the pieces of the skate. It's like they had already just made the notes and were good to go and ran into it and gave them this absolutely massive score. That free dance, they got a 137.71 for a combined total of 229.55, which is huge.
Well, for context, just so that we're clear, the highest score internationally for anyone this season is Chalk and Bates at 219.85. So it's almost very, very close to 10 points higher than the highest international score. Gillis and Poirier's high of the season internationally is 214.84. That's a massive difference. To be fair, again, Gillis and Poirier haven't had the best international season, and this was certainly the best competition I've seen from them this season, no question. But I think the thing that really kind of threw me the most was like looking at their own personal best. This exceeds by like 10 points. So it's not that they didn't deserve the win here, although I will question that Lajoie and Laga were also damn near flawless. And I'm always questioning scores there as well, and positioning and all of that with ice dance. But it's also just Canada, why? Like, you can give a little bit extra. They did it in every discipline. I felt like there was a little extra. But in dance and Skate Canada's, like, I know, bylaws, it almost feels like, oh no, we have to make sure that these are outrageous.
Yeah, it's kind of become a joke where, like, I mean, if you see people talking about this stuff leading up to Canadian Nationals, the joke was always like, let's see how much they inflate the numbers. It does seem to be at Skate Canada and at Canadian Nationals, there always seems to be this score inflation, and particularly this team seems to be the frequent recipient of it. Again, with no taking, they're not dictating those scores. They're just going out there and performing
this isn't
super
a dig on them at all.
Yeah, but it's even if you look at Gillis and Poirier, and as great as those programs were, there were a few little issues. Like at one point, Piper just puts her leg down on top of Paul's head in the middle of
one of their lifts.
In one of their lifts. It's a very small thing, and it's the kind of thing that in ice dance, all those little moves matter. They also have this movement. They have this beautiful assisted cartwheel that I just love.
It's incredible.
And then they followed up with this little like seasick move.
It's like very literal choreography.
Yeah, and it's really unpleasant. It's the aesthetically unpleasant in that performance. We've seen it better before. And I don't know that that counts against anything. I just didn't like the look of it. But it's like she literally puts her leg on his head on accident in one of those lifts and then still gets like magnificent GOEs. And this is ice dance where those things are supposed to get dinged. So it does feel a little weird. It's nothing to take away from the team. They did really well here. As usual, I do prefer Lala. Marjorie LaJoie and Zach Laga just have programs I like better and stylistically I enjoy more. I don't know that I would argue that they necessarily won here because Gillis and Poirier just have such incredibly difficult and intricate programs.
Yeah.
And the footwork is insane. But still, both those numbers for both of those teams actually felt really, really high.
Yes, they did. I mean, to be fair about the scoring, inflation, Lejeune Laga's top international score this year doesn't even break 200.
And they got a 218.52 here.
Right. So I don't think it's just Piper and Paul.
You got like a 20-point inflation.
It is weird. It's a judging thing, and I don't understand it. But that said, we're spending too much time dwelling on that instead of the great performances that they gave.
Yeah.
So bravo to both of those teams for really coming into Canadian Nationals and putting down wonderful programs, rhythm dance and free, leading into the rest of the season, because I think it sets them up beautifully.
Yeah, and congrats to Alicia Fabry and Paul Ayer for taking that bronze medal spot. When we were doing our predictions for it, that's kind of what we thought was going to happen, because we've seen, even though Laurent and Lagac are kind of the stronger team technically overall, they have just not been performing super well this season, and the judges have not been rewarding them. It came very close here. It was a matter of like a couple of points. And also, to be fair, we didn't see Laurent and Lagac's programs because we couldn't find them anywhere.
No, it was so
online.
hard.
We can't really compare them, but I did like what I saw from Fabry and Ayer. And while they're not the most exciting team, I think these were probably the best performances that we've seen from them this season. I, in particular, really like that rhythm dance. It's super cute, and I'm very happy for them here.
Well, let's move on to the FISU World University Games, where that men's competition was, as I kind of expected whenever we found out who was going to be there, a complete wow. Starting off with our first place and gold medalist, Yuma Kageyama. His short program was the best I've seen from anybody this season. It was astoundingly good.
His short program looked like an Olympic performance.
Yes.
And we got that at the University Games. It was stunning. Absolutely flawless.
Yeah. And it got a 106.82.
Yes, it was brilliant. His quad sal was just dreamy. He was artistically on point. Nothing felt like it was being forced or like just pedaled to the metal. He took his time. He delivered a genius performance. He was a little bit more uneven in the free skate. He actually was like third in the free skate, I think, overall. But on the power of that short program, he still won. I think if he skates like he did in that short program in the rest of the competitions for the season, he will make himself very difficult to beat. The other competition is a whole other conversation to have there, but he looked fantastic.
Unbelievable. I do want to point out, second place, silver medal, Daniel Grassel. He won the free skate. And while I really don't like the music, especially for that free skate, it hits every beat against my better judgment. Like, I just don't like it. That said, he did a really good job here. Yes, Daniel always has some under rotation problems, but he was on home ice in Italy and he looked it. He looked so happy, so engaged. I think it's the best I've seen him skate overall. Yes. And while I'm not always the biggest fan of his skating, I am happy for him here because that really was a remarkable effort with a lot of pressure. Even though, I mean, the University Games isn't like the biggest competition, to do it in front of Italian crowds, I was just really impressed.
His new short program is great.
It is.
He replaced it, and the new one works so much better on him. He just looked comfortable, confident, and clearly has done the work.
He's the most consistent man this season.
Yes, absolutely.
Which pains me to say, but it's true.
There's a reason why he's been ranking so high through this whole season, because he has the least amount of screw-ups. He mends the least of the men.
He does.
And he was really enjoyable here. But it was also really nice to see a bronze medal finish from Korea's Junwon Cha, who, when we talk about brilliant performances, his free skate, while it didn't score as high as Grassel's based on sort of technical aspects, artistically was a joy.
I'm going to throw one tiny bit of side eye that he didn't win the free skate. You can't see it, but there's just a little bit. But his free skate was the best I've seen him in so long. And he was great at South Korean nationals. This was better. His free skate especially, wow. It was his short program that left him in third, really, because he did have a fall. So it is fair that Daniel came in ahead of him. But that free skate was just astoundingly good. Whenever I made mention of go find something online later, this is what I'm talking about. It's worth going through all of those FISU live streams to see this program and to see Yuma Kageyama's short program. They are two genius programs.
Yes, all three of those top guys delivered performances that are worth watching. Also worth watching all the way to the end after the free skate to see the medal ceremony, because one, it's hilarious to see the three of them stand on the top of the podium together for photos, because Yuma is so much smaller than Jun and Daniel, but also because for whatever reason at the FISU Games, they don't play the national anthems of the winners. They play the FISU anthem, which is some sort of pentatonics style a cappella song, and nobody expects it. Nobody knows that's what's about to happen. And so the flags go up, and then this weird a cappella song comes on, and everybody looks super confused.
So lost.
And then you can basically see Yuma turn to Daniel and go, "What the hell was that?" And Daniel start laughing and be like, "I don't know." I don't know that's exactly what happened there, but they're all...
But that's certainly what it looked like.
We saw the same thing with the women where they got onto the podium and everybody's looking at each other like, what is going on? Nobody has any clue. It's very, very strange. But
it is.
I think if you look at three of the other elite competitors who were here that took the 4th, 5th, and 6th spot with Mikhail Shadorov, Shun Sato, and Sota Yamamoto, you get some diminishing returns here. It's not as strong as we'd like to see, even though Mikhail is actually only like 4 points behind Junwan here, I think.
Yeah, he was also dealing with I wouldn't say an injury, but he was dealing with some kind of...
He was having leg cramps. And you could see that he could not get his full extensions. Even when you'd see him do his one-handed cartwheels and stuff, you could tell that Shadorov couldn't get his legs fully extended. And it was just clear that he was skating careful.
Yes.
He was not throwing his entire arsenal out there. If there was a thing that made me sad, though, it was seeing a continued sort of degradation of the quality of Shun Sato's skates. I feel like right now he looks like a guy who peaked in the middle of the season and has been trending downwards. And I hope that is not something that carries forward for the last competitions of the season. But he didn't look great here, and it's a shame because he's such a terrific skater. I would have hoped for a better performance, and you've got to think that the Japanese team is eyeing him really hard because he got the nod for Worlds after having a really bad Nationals, and he is just not looking like a real strong threat right now.
Yeah, we'll have to see what happens at 4 continents. But Sota Yamamoto was a last-minute sub-in for Kalmura, who was injured, and I think he did a perfectly respectable job. It was not perfect, but for a competition that he wasn't prepared to be at and to just show up, 6th place isn't bad. And we know it has not been his season, but I'm just looking forward to next season for him already.
Notably, he was the reigning FISU World Champion.
Yes.
So from 2 years ago, he won that event. And this one, he just had to come in last minute and sort of show up and do his best. I still really like these programs. I still really like his skates. He obviously wasn't quite as prepared for it as we'd like. I'm hoping for good things for him next season.
Well, let's talk about the women's before we move on to the U.S. Nationals preview. I think it could be stated that it was a bit of an upset here.
Yes, I'm really excited because, I love the entire Japanese women's contingent. They're all great. But I've been a big fan of Ryan Sumiyoshi since the first time that we saw her. And her just edging out the top spot here against her teammate Munichiba is an impressive showing for her. She did throw her quad toe in the free skate. She didn't quite get it around. She double-footed the landing of it. I'm guessing it probably got downgraded, but that was pretty ballsy to do that at the FISU Games. And in general, I just thought she looked really good. And so I think this season, even though she had some really solid performances on the Grand Prix, I think that she's been more middle of the pack of the Japanese women this season. Taking a win here has got to feel really good and set her up well to head into 4 continents.
Into 4 continents and into next season, honestly. She is someone who has really wonderful skating skills, has some inconsistent jumps, but I think they keep getting more consistent. And with a 2:04.29, that would put her right in the mix to be amongst the top women in the world, if not like maybe the very, very top in the mix towards winning Grand Prix. Not that she hasn't been there already, but this, I don't know, re-solidifies her, and I hope it gives her some momentum going forward. That said, in first after the short, Mona Chiba had just one fall in the free skate, I believe, that kind of held her back. But she also just looked a little less shiny in the free skate. She has looked so remarkable in that free skate all season. And this time she just didn't quite look herself as much. It just wasn't there. So her coming in second here, I thought was completely on point. And I very much don't think that is going to impact her going into Four Continents. I still think she's probably the favorite going in there.
Yeah, for sure.
Just wasn't her day.
Yeah, but Rion definitely made her case here. So
she did.
I think that's really interesting. I also think that the third place finish for Kazakhstan's Sofia Samdolkina is kind of notable here. Sofia is a former Russian, or is a Russian who now represents Kazakhstan. I think that her last Russian outings were back in like 2021, I think. And then in 2024, she started representing Kazakhstan. She's not a skater that I know a whole lot about, but watching her on the ice, I definitely see echoes of both like Vilieva and Sherbakova in her skating style. And I know that she's also really good friends with Sasha Trusova. So she seems like she came out of that camp. However, she looks healthy, versus like so many of the girls from the Atiri camp always looked like they were about to pass out. Samdolkina looks like somebody who is a healthy athlete and looked really happy to be there and to be performing. And I thought her skates were really enjoyable.
I thought she did a really, really great job, especially in her short program. It was just solid skating. And I think we should expect to see more from her. And I like that there is another Kazakhstan representative so that Misha has somebody to hang out with at some of these competitions. Not that there's not other men, you know what I'm saying.
Yeah. And it's fun if you see some of the behind the scenes stuff. You can see the Kazakhstan team like playing around together in the warm-ups and before the gala and stuff. And they all seem like they were having a really good time, which is super cute. And Sofia just has some really strong jumps. So
she does.
It's worth looking out for.
And fourth here was Hana Yoshida. She was definitely one of the favorites coming in here as well, alongside Mona Chiba and Rayon. Her short program just failed her a little bit. I thought the free skate was better. She came in third in the free. But overall, I just have not felt these programs all season from her. She's a wonderful skater. It's just not quite her year either. It's very similar to Sori Yamamoto.
I felt this whole season that this is a case of the material not living up to the skater and not the other way around. I think Hana Yoshida is a brilliant skater. She's such a bright, wonderful presence on the ice. It just hasn't looked as good this season. She was last year's essentially rookie of the year, and sometimes you get that come down afterwards. So I'm hoping that she can regroup and going into next season and fix that up. In fifth, we see Italy's Laurinaki Gutman, who actually was in fourth after the short program, but did not have a very successful free skate, which dropped her down. Again, I love these programs. I really enjoy Gutman as a skater. Just wasn't quite as sharp as the last time we saw her when she won bronze at Finlandia. I'm hoping that she gets a really good Europeans coming up here.
She's got a couple of weeks, so not too far away.
But it wasn't awful by any means. It was pretty enjoyable. There was a lot of really enjoyable performances, and overall, I thought FISU was pretty awesome.
Well, then let's move on to the U.S. Nationals, which is coming up this week, happening in Wichita, Kansas, which for those of you who are not in the United States, it is pretty much smack dab in the middle of the country and going to be cold. Very cold is my guess. So let's start with the men's, because I feel like it's the absolute most obvious of who's going to win, and that will be Ilya Malinin.
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of almost no way Ilya doesn't win this unless either he has to withdraw for some reason or it's something catastrophic happens. But otherwise, he could water his program down by half and still take this thing because he just has such high value in his technical, and he has shown that his components and his artistry have advanced pretty significantly. The real question is the rest of the field, because notably today, Jason Brown withdrew from the competition. He's been having all types of equipment issues that have made it really difficult for him to train for several weeks. And so he had to pull out of it. So Jason being your other big name in this, the last person that you have who has been very notable on the international scene and more successful this season than Jason is Andrew Torgashev.
Torgashev is the one who I'm here to see, because I loved watching him on the Grand Prix, going back-to-back competitions and ending up medaling at the second one, which is frankly unheard of in the sense that like he went week over week, should have been more exhausted in the second competition, didn't even know he was going there, and then medaled. Wonderful job, but also just great to see consistency from him because that's always been the problem. Torgs is so talented and we need him to step up as the number 2 man in the country. And that's no shade to Jason. I'm really sad to see him not here. I wanted him to remain the number 2 man in the country, but if that's not happening, the door is wide open for Andrew Torgashev.
Yes, if he can just be as consistent as he has been through the rest of the season, then I think he locks up second without any problem. But, we have seen at other times Torgashev not perform as well. I just feel like it comes down to he needs to bring Brandon Frazier with him.
Yeah.
Because every time Brandon Frazier is his stand-in coach, Torgashev rocks. And their vibe is always so fun. So that's what I'm hoping for here. I think if he performs the way he should, and if he performs consistently, then he is your obvious choice for silver. And then everything kind of comes down to what could be happening in bronze. But I think that the wild card here is probably the junior skater Jacob Sanchez, who actually made his senior international debut just recently. But Jacob is the one who's been really kind of starting to make waves and making people take notice of him.
I think this is the moment where we see him hopefully, move forward into that, hey, by the way, I am a potential for that Olympic team. He just won the junior Grand Prix. That's no small feat against people like Ryo Nakata and Mikyuseo. There's a strong men's juniors field, and he just beat them at Grand Prix finals. So him coming here, fresh off of a win at the Tallinn Cup, which was over several other people we've talked about on this broadcast, including Roman Sadovsky. Yeah, it's his time. He's right there. He's been kind of palling around with Ilya. We've seen some Instagram footage of them. So I don't know. I feel like it's a good opportunity for him. The other people, though, that are going to, I think, be in this mix are Max Naumov, who is sort of everyone's favorite personally. He just seems like such a sweet person. And he is so entertaining, such an engaging skater. I feel like there's a lot of people who also feel like he's been underscored for the past few national championships. He's always like that, always a bridesmaid, never a bride guy. So it would be nice and refreshing to see him come in here with 2 strong programs and take third. I don't know that we're going to see it, but I'd love to see it. Yeah,
I really enjoy Max's skating, but I haven't seen enough of him this season to have any level of confidence in what he's going to be able to do. And sort of echoing that, it's the way I feel about Camden Pulkkinen as well. I adore Camden. He's such a great personality on and off the ice. However, he never feels like he's a complete skater right now. It feels like his trajectory is kind of heading out of competition. And he has not looked like a very competitive skater for the last 2 seasons. And so I don't have huge hopes for him. And the other people here, I just sort of don't know a lot about.
Yeah, there's Daniel Martinov, who's also, not as fresh out of juniors as Jacob, but I think he's in his second senior season. He came in second to Jacob at the Tallinn Cup over Roman, so he could show up here and do really well. And then there's Tomoki Hiwatashi. You can't undersell what he could potentially do. I feel like he's another one of those, when he shows up on the right day, he's wonderful, but then on other days, it's just a complete mess. So we'll have to kind of see which version we get.
I think the competition within this competition is just who is going to be the second wave, the future of the franchise after Ilya. And my money is definitely on good performances from Torgashev and Sanchez here.
Same.
But also the men can always men, so you just never know.
Let's move on to pairs, where I feel like it's Ellie and Danny's to lose. Ellie Kam and Danny O'Shea have had a great season overall. It hasn't been flawless. They haven't won the most medals, but they made the Grand Prix final. They looked really strong there. They looked like they belonged there. Overall, we've just seen such a wonderful improvement in their skating. I really do feel like this could be their second national title unless they come in and have some disasters.
They just have to land jumps and land throws. And
probably not even all of them.
Right, yeah.
Most of them.
Yeah.
In no way.
If they perform as well as they did in their last couple of outings on the Grand Prix, I think they should have it wrapped up, no problem. Now, I'll put an asterisk in this because, there are other good teams here. And I think that if there's a team that is really the true threat to them, it is Efimova and Mitrofana.
Completely agree. While Emily and Spencer are here and they're fully back. They're competing for real this time. Chan and Hao have been fifth in the world before. They are not at that level right now. I don't know what to expect, but I don't expect them to be the biggest threat to Ellie and Danny. I agree with you that Efimova and Mitrofanov have been just a hair's breadth behind, and they keep getting better. Every time we see them, there's little bits of improvement. Even when they have mistakes, you're just seeing them come together better as a team. And they were the silver medalists last year at Nationals. And I just don't think you should discount them at all. They could definitely take this.
Yeah, Alisa Efimova and Misha Mitrofanov, when we saw them at Skate America, I was really surprised with how much I enjoyed their skating. I really liked their programs. I particularly enjoyed them in the gala there. There's still a fairly new team together, but there's a lot of these teams are fairly new. Emily Chan and Spencer Akira Howe are sort of like the veterans of this field versus a lot of these other teams that have not been together that long. So, I mean, I agree that like Ellie and Danny, it should be theirs to kind of take, but the other teams could put some pressure on them. And then you have teams like Katie McBeath and Dylan Parkman, who are definitely a fun team. I don't expect like big firepower out of them, but I do like them, and they have shown a lot of improvement.
But I'm most excited to see Audrey Schitt and Balazs Naj, if I'm being completely honest. We haven't seen that much of them yet. They had one international competition so far where I believe they came in second. Balazs is so solid. Audrey is coming out of singles. This is her first season as a pairs girly. I don't know what to expect, but I have kind of high hopes for what we could see from them.
Yeah, I mean, I have high hopes for that team. If there's a team that I'm actually really excited to see again, it's the junior team of Naomi Williams and Lachlan Lure. We watched them at Junior Worlds last year, and I just really enjoy this team. They're a ton of fun. I don't expect them to be able to rack up the points to be really high up on this podium.
Well, this is only their first senior season.
Yeah, so Williams and Lure are only just now really dipping their toes into senior competition, and I think this should be a really good experience for them and give them more exposure, but I like this team a lot.
Me too. Well, I think it's safe to say that the women's competition is probably going to be the one with the most fireworks.
But notably, no Isabeau Levito.
No Isabeau Levito, which is a definite bummer. Unequivocal loss to the overall competition to not have her presence there, especially after the past few years of her being such an important player in this and really just not knowing what to make of the rest of the season's potential for her. I do think that it's going to depend on what we see here as to whether Isabeau gets a bye to get that world's nod, dependent on who else is on this team.
Yeah, because I mean, Isabeau is the reigning world silver medalist, and she has been sort of the American ice princess for the last few seasons, but it just has gotten overtaken by Amber in the last year. This season, she's mostly been a ghost. I mean, we saw her a few times early in the season and kind of underperform and then land in third at Skate America, and then she's been out with injury ever since. And so she had to announce that because of continuing injury, she can't compete at nationals. And so that does shake up the field quite a bit as far as how the expectations are going to go. And we talked about in a previous episode that Ava Marie Ziegler is also out. So her whole season is a wash as well. So the obvious choice for first is Amber Glenn, who's coming into this undefeated so far this season.
And she could only beat herself, honestly.
Pretty much, yeah.
Like, there's nobody here that has what she has. So I feel like if Amber doesn't win, it's because Amber has made enough mistakes where she loses. If she comes in and even skates 80% of what she can do, she'll win.
She's been so terrific all season. Her mental game seems so much stronger. So as long as her conditioning is good going into this and she's feeling steady and, you know, the ice is kind, she should take this. But of course, we've seen upsets happen before.
Absolutely.
So you just don't know what will happen. But
it is certainly not as clear cut as Ilya.
Right. Yeah. If Isabeau was here, I think that you would have a greater opportunity for that to be a back and forth. But now that question comes down to a lot of these other skaters who have had solid seasons, but have not quite gotten up there. So this is where we're talking about Alyssa Liu, Brady Tennell, Sarah Everhart, and Elise Lynn Gracie, who have all had some really good outings and some less than stellar outings. All of them have sort of, it seems like, traded places over the season to look like what would be like the third ranking woman in the U.S. roster. And I think that's kind of any of their game for this one.
Completely. It's a toss-up. If you looked at overall numbers, Elise Lynn Gracie is the one with the highest other score. She's the only one who's got even close to Amber's scores. Like, I think hers in early challenger events was at a 213, which is a fantastic score. and could threaten Amber if Amber doesn't have her best day for sure. But we also saw that in the Grand Prix, Elise Lynn Gracie folded a bit under pressure, which is not surprising considering she's still a fairly young competitor, doesn't have the international experience that a lot of these other competitors do. I think she's kind of a wild card. Like you could see brilliance or you could see her have a little bit too much pressure and not quite know what to do with it yet.
Yeah, she might have peaked early at the season. I hope that's not the case because I would love to see her return to that form from the early challenger competitions.
Same. We've seen gorgeous moments from Alyssa Liu's return season, but we've also seen some under rotation problems. Really, I think that's mostly due to just having to rebuild her own conditioning and this being her first season back in competition in 3 years. So it's time with her more than anything. But I will say she's been fairly consistent and she has won a few international medals already. So don't count her out. Alyssa's capable of a lot.
Alyssa's short program is great.
So good.
Her free skate is not quite as solid, and it's definitely where you see those conditioning issues. So we haven't seen her for a little while, and I'm hoping that she has just had the opportunity to put in the work and shore up that bit of a vulnerability.
And then you have Brady, who could come out and just skate amazingly, or she could fall apart. We've seen, again, some under rotation issues. We've seen really brilliant performances. We've seen some that were just okay. I think we've leaned more to the just okay, but not bad. She has fallen into the between 190 and 200 in that range of scores pretty consistently this season. So she could definitely be on the podium here.
Brady is always a threat because she is so competent and usually pretty consistent. I don't think those programs are particularly interesting, and I think that puts her in a little bit of a disadvantage here. But I also feel like the U.S. Federation would be very happy to throw her at some of these, upcoming competitions if she showed up well.
But you cannot count out Sarah Everhart. She has really been the most consistent woman, other than Amber, really, for the U.S. this season. And while she lacks a lot of the overall artistic ability, her composition scores are just not going to be as high. Her potential for wonderful technical and the high GOE value, because her jumps are so good, pushes her through. And it has really allowed her to kind of be an underdog, through a lot of this season, who you cannot count out.
I think that if the U.S. Fed was smart, they would definitely be sending Everhart to at least one of the two remaining big international competitions this season.
Agreed.
Because even if it is just getting her the experience to get her out there, she has so much potential to be a real contender over the next couple of years. And if they can just work on her presentation and get it to the point where she can get those component scores, she could be really, really dangerous. She's a lot of fun to watch. She does need to show emotion out there. She's a little bit of a jumping automaton sometimes, but I do think that she is probably the biggest technical threat of anybody beyond Amber.
There's kind of a litany of other women here who are the we'll see moments, like Josephine Lee, who is our reigning national silver medalist. And she was just brilliant last year at nationals. And frankly, she's been brilliant at the past 2 nationals. Maybe that's just her competition, because every other competition we have not seen that version of Josephine Lee. So you can't count her out here because it seems to be the place where she shines the brightest.
Every time we see Joey skate at nationals, we're like, that is the star of the future. And then the rest of her skates don't live up to that. But yeah, she just might be the national skater. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if she three-peats that here, because she has a lot of quality, she does not seem to handle pressure well in international competition.
No. And then you also have Mia Kalin, who landed the quad last year at nationals, a giant first for her, but the rest of her program just didn't quite live up to it. And also in the competition, there's Star Andrews, there's Lindsay Thorngren, an underdog always, but one of my favorites, Sonia Hilmer, will be there. And it's just going to be a fun competition to watch. It is a deep field of really talented women.
And there could always be surprises with this. You never know who will just rise on that given day.
Absolutely. So, I'm here for it.
Yeah. I mean, if I was going to take a guess at this, I would think that the podium here ends up being Amber, Sarah, Alyssa. That's the way I think this will go. But I think that Elise Lynn Gracie and Joey Lee are also solid threats to just turn the lights on that particular day. And of course, you can never count out Brady. So, but that's where I'm going with it.
I'm not even taking a guess. I'm just going to let it roll.
Yeah.
Let's finish up with dance, where I feel like unless there is, I mean, Chalk and Bates had the flu last year. They looked like ghosts on the ice, and they still won.
Evan almost threw up as he finished the free dance. He literally looked like he puked in his mouth as he was skating off, and they still won because they're that good.
Yeah. Unless there is a massive disaster,
which they're capable of.
They're always capable of it.
Maddie falls sometimes.
She does. And you never know with Evan. I mean, he is the most solid partner, but flukes happen.
Yeah.
It's not impossible. But outside of a fluke or a disaster, Chalk and Bates will win this with two gorgeous programs in that long program. I've said it before. I will say it again. Masterpiece.
Magnifique.
So good. So the real competition is everyone else fighting for silver and bronze. I do feel like Carrera and Ponomarenko have that silver essentially locked up, but we'll see.
I thought that Carrera and Ponomarenko's programs looked a little stronger earlier in the season, particularly the free dance. Like, it was so fiery and passionate and sexy early on and didn't look quite as strong later, but they are still a terrific team, and they have definitely been the second American team this whole season. But I think that the come up of Zingis and Kolznick can't be discounted because they've been looking stronger and stronger every outing this season.
I 100% agree. I feel like the real competition here, we're going to have a beautiful, almost entertaining exhibition from Chalk and Bates where they come in and they win because they're so good. You're going to have Carrera and Ponomarenko. As long as they do what they do, they have sort of solidified their position, because I Stance is I Stance, as the second team. So unless there is just something miraculous, that's a safe zone. That bronze is so interesting because I agree that come up of Zingis and Kolznick has been brilliant this season. Their long program is one of my favorites. It's phenomenal, and it really pushes them into a different zone. Like, you always use that, like, things feel samey between, year over year with some of these teams. They don't. They feel like they are extending themselves in new directions to learn more about what they can do as a team. So I would be thrilled to see them take that third spot. But remember, last year, that went to Emily Brody and Ian Somerville. They haven't looked as strong this season, but when they have looked good, they're also tough to beat. They're so strong. And Ian is especially just, and I hate to be that person, he is undeniable.
But you have to take into account that Emily has been the more consistent partner this season.
She has.
When they've had problems, it's been falls from Ian, and Emily has been essentially unflappable out there. But Brody and Somerville have had some surprise podium placements over the course of this season. They have beaten teams that I don't think anybody going in expected them to rise above.
True.
And I don't think you can discount them because
Not at all.
They've had some pretty brilliant outings this season.
But then again, you also can't discount Green and Parsons because remember, they have been that third team on the podium before. They are 4 continents champions. They have had great successes. It's only been in the past 2 seasons where we've seen them falter and fall behind these other teams. So their programs, their material is much better this season than it's been in the past 2 years. They are capable of really bringing forward something wonderful. I think that the competition between those 3 is going to be very interesting this time because Green and Parsons have improved on their scores this season. So if I were to place bets, I would still probably, if everyone is clean, put Brody and Somerville in that third spot based on what we know of them at this point. But it's going to be real close.
Well, and the tricky thing is that you also have the Brown siblings. And Una and Gage at the beginning of the season are the team I would have thought would be maybe the 4th spot. But they've drifted a little bit as time's gone along. And even as they've tightened up those programs and made them look really nice, international judges haven't always rewarded them. So I'll be very curious what that looks like here in domestic competition, because I think that it's a pretty tight run across that grouping. I don't expect a really big point spread unless they all have issues. At the beginning of the season, I would have thought that Nisset and Markelov would be a bigger threat, but after the season that they've had, I don't feel super strong about that.
They're still in their first full senior season. they're looking great, but also this is ice dance and everyone has to wait their turn to a certain degree. Some people jumped the line.
They looked like they were going to be that team.
They looked like they were. And frankly, they have jumped it over certain folks, but you can't jump it all the way. So I do feel like we're probably, if I was going to take a guess, going to see them land in either 5th or 6th.
Well, and I think the thing with Nisset and Markelov is that over the course of this season, I think it's become more apparent that they are more flash than substance. They lean very heavily into Nisset's incredible flexibility and all the weird shapes that they can make with her. And those things are impressive, but they don't really tell a story on the ice. They just kind of do crazy, wild things that are cool to watch, but don't necessarily create a cohesive program. And I used to levy that same complaint against Zingis and Kolsnik because I thought early on they felt like a team that could do a lot of really impressive stuff, but they didn't necessarily deliver something that felt complete to me. And I think this season that has been shored up a lot with them. I don't think Nisset and Markelov have that maturity in their performance yet, and just in their programs. I think it just leans too heavily on those big flashy moments and not enough on real full skating skill.
I think it's just their age. For instance, we saw them walking around Skate America, just around the backstage area whenever we were there.
They're babies and they're married. It's real weird.
That part is none of my business.
Yeah.
But they are very young. And just seeing them walking around, if I didn't know who they were, I would have thought they were 15.
Yeah.
So give them time. And yeah, I have nothing to say about the marriage part. That's none of my business.
that's a whole other can of worms.
Yeah,
that's
it is.
A whole
Not
other
talking
long
about
story.
that.
Yeah. The other team here
we're also married and it's all cool.
Right. Is Peyton By. Peyton By are an enjoyable team that I do not think are a factor when it comes to the bigger scores here. I think you have seen them sort of drift their way down over time. I think Peyton By are sort of like the American equivalent of the Canadian Fabrian Air. A very solid team that in a different era might have been more notable, but in the current moment level of competition, they just don't quite have the pizzazz to be like a really high ranking team, but they're always enjoyable.
I do feel bad because you're right. That's exactly it. They are a really strong team who just happen to live in a time of an absurd amount of depth. You know, it's like we were talking about at the beginning of this episode about Canadian men's field being so thin. We are abundant in dance in the US right now. There are so many fantastic teams, and we're just naming the top ones. There's just a lot of them. And Peyton By are not going to be a threat here, but they're going to be fun to watch regardless.
Yeah. I expect, like you said earlier, unless they just absolutely monumentally screw up, Chalk and Bates will be in first, Korea and Pomerenko will be in silver. The toss-up becomes bronze. I can't decide between Zingis and Kolsnik and Brody and Somerville. I do think that's the fight. If Brody and Somerville perform as well as they did earlier in the season, I think they take that spot. But if they leave any opportunity at all, I think Zingis and Kolsnik will lock it down.
This whole thing's going to be interesting. I really feel like U.S. Nationals has a lot to offer, and I am very, very curious. And I'm not going to lie, there's a part of me that's like, I'm excited for this one, but I am already more excited for next year because we bought our tickets for St. Louis. So we're going to actually be there in person. We will not be at this year's competition in Wichita. So
we can't afford it after buying next year's.
No, we cannot.
Good Lord.
That is absolutely true. However, I will be watching this year's, eagerly anticipating next year's.
Yeah. So disregarding all of the U.S. national stuff, but thinking about FISU and the Canadian Nationals, let's talk gold in our hearts. I know it shoves two of those competitions together.
Yeah.
But who do you pick as gold in your heart from either FISU or Canadian Nationals?
I gotta go with June. Damn it.
It's so obvious. I knew that's where I was going.
I know, but my brain went, it could be Anthony Paradis because I do adore him. But it's June. It's June 100%. That free skate, I was physically being pulled forward into the television while I was watching it. It was so good. It's just, I want to see him continue to ride this wave that he's had since Korean Nationals, where that was great. This was better. keep going, sir. Like, I can't wait to see the rest of the season for him.
Really lovely gala at that too.
Absolutely gorgeous.
He's the only thing we saw from the gala because we just happened to see that on YouTube. And it was interesting that they did it all under bright lights. I think they didn't have the spotlights and the whole kind of fancy setup for it. But yeah, that gala skate is really cool.
So who's gold in your heart?
Can you guess?
Sarah Maud Dupuis.
Yeah, Sarah Maud Dupuis.
Okay.
Yeah. I think that's probably the second time this season that she's been gold in my heart, because when we saw her in the Challenger series and she had done so well in a short program with that Evanescence program, I was really thrilled with it. If you had not said June, he definitely would have been a possibility for me as well, because I did think he was marvelous there. But I love the underdog factor for Sarah Maud Dupuis. I think her energy is really great, and those two skates were so enjoyable. And I just love seeing somebody finish on the ice to such a huge ovation from a hometown crowd like that. So I thought that was pretty terrific.
I think that wraps us up. And we're only a few days out from U.S. Nationals starting. So if you check out, I believe it's the U.S. Figure Skating's Instagram page or the NBC Olympics Instagram, they have already shared some posts about the viewing schedule. If you're in the U.S., outside of the U.S., I'm not sure if it's going to be available unless you have VPN. Hopefully, fingers crossed, there's some YouTube videos out there for you.
Yeah, shout out to the people who post videos from all of these different events separately on YouTube. You, the real ones. And a lot of times, this is the only way we can see anything.
That's the only way we saw anything from Canada.
It was making me nuts about Canada because people kept posting about the performances, but nobody would put the scores, and Skate Canada's website wouldn't update with the results for long periods of time afterwards. And
only in their Insta stories. That's the only way I could find it.
It was just kind of maddening. It's like we couldn't get a full live feed. We weren't sure where that was even coming from. So we were depending on the kindness of strangers for people who were posting these things online. So thank you all for doing that. Next time we talk to you, we will be recapping U.S. Nationals and seeing if anything shakes out the way that we thought it would.
And we'll also be given a little bit of a preview for the European Championships, because that's the next weekend. So right after U.S. Nationals, Euros.
Yeah, it'd be wild. Until we get to that, in the comments, tell us who your predictions are, what you expect to shake out at this U.S. Nationals, and what you thought of Canadian Nationals and the FISU Games, if you were able to watch those. Until then, for Choreography, I'm Adrian Buskey.
And I'm Wendy Buskey.
And we will talk to you next time.
Bye.